The examination at La Vaupelière, July 1944. July 28, 1944. La Vaupelière, France. The smell of diesel, earth, and burnt metal hung thick in the Normandy. Oberleutnant Klaus Fischer, an engineer attached to Panzer Division, ran his hand across the warm, drab green steel of the vehicle's hull. It wasn't a Tiger, its armor not imposing. It wasn't a Panther, its silhouette not sleek. It was an American M4 Sherman, its name crudely stenciled on the barrel. Bouncing Betty. This one had thrown a track and been abandoned in a horrid retreat, nearly intact. For Fischer and the small team of technicians from the Waffenamt, the German Army Weapons Agency, it was a pristine prize. "Open it," Fischer ordered, his voice flat. A corporal pried open a hull access plate with a crowbar. Fischer peered inside, his flashlight beam cutting through the dim interior. He wasn't looking for weaknesses, not just yet. He was conducting an industrial autopsy. His fingers traced weld seams, clean, consistent, fast. Not the meticulous hand-fitting of a German workshop, but the ruthless, efficient joinery of a production line. He noted the components. Standardized bolts, identical electrical connectors, a transmission that was clearly designed for easy removal. He crawled out, wiping grease on his trousers, and walked to the rear. The engine deck was open. "Aircraft engine," he muttered to his assistant, Feldwebel Weber. "A radial. They build these by the thousand for their planes, and they just drop it into a tank." Weber, clutching a clipboard, nodded. "The suspension, Herr Oberleutnant. Look." He pointed to the 3 large bogies on each side. Simple vertical volute springs. Not interleaved road wheels. Easy to manufacture. Easy to replace in the field. Fischer didn't respond. He was doing the math in his head, a cold calculus that had nothing to do with battlefield glory. This tank was not a masterpiece of engineering. It was a masterpiece of logistics. He imagined the factories across the ocean, the unbroken streams of raw steel, the legions of workers who didn't need to be master craftsmen, just diligent assemblers. He thought of the Krupp works in Essen, hammered around the clock by IAF Bomber Command, producing a handful of perfect, complex Tigers each month. Then he thought of this, the bouncing Betty, one of tens of thousands, arriving on every convoy, from every port. A profound and chilling realization settled over him, heavier than the Norman mud. This wasn't a tank they could simply outfight. This was a tide they could not possibly stem, the report and the cold reality of mass. Later that evening, in a makeshift command post set up in a battered chateau, the true weight of the afternoon's examination settled in. The air was thick with the smell of damp stone, stale cigarettes, and anxiety. Klaus Fischer sat at a scarred oak table, a single kerosene lamp casting long shadows, as he drafted his preliminary report for the Waffenamt. Feldwebel Weber laid out sketches and component notes beside him. "Begin with the automotive plant," Fischer said, his pen scratching on the coarse paper. "The Chrysler Detroit tank arsenal. Our intelligence suggests it is a converted automobile factory. They did not build a new factory for this tank. They repurpose an existing one. The production philosophy is alien to us." He spoke aloud, organizing his thoughts. "The M4 uses a homogeneous armor plate, rolled and welded. No face hardening for the most part. It is softer than our plate, but they can produce it in staggering volume. The casting of the turret and hull front is crude by our standards, but it eliminates hundreds of machining hours." Weber pointed to a diagram of the suspension. "Herr Oberleutnant, the simplicity is its armor. We estimate a complete bogie unit can be replaced by a crew with a crane in under 2 hours. For a Panzer." He left the sentence hanging. Replacing the interleaved road wheels on a Panther or Tiger was a day-long ordeal for a dedicated maintenance crew, often under fire. Fischer leaned back, the chair creaking. He looked not at the report, but through the stone wall, towards the west where the distant thunder of naval artillery was a constant reminder of the enemy's bottomless supply. "They have made a conscious choice, Weber," he said, his voice low. "They have traded technical perfection for numerical and logistical superiority. This Sherman is not designed to defeat a Panther one-on-one on an open field. It is designed to be everywhere." He tapped the paper with his finger for emphasis. "It is designed to break down less often, and when it does, to be fixed quickly with interchangeable parts from any other Sherman. It is designed to be shipped across an ocean, fueled with the same petrol as their trucks, and operated by a crew trained in weeks, not months. He thought of the Eastern Front reports, of the endless waves of T-34s, another simple, mass-produced weapon. But this was different. The American system had a terrifying, clean efficiency to it. The T-34 was brutal and crude. The Sherman was a consumable product of an industrial society operating at its peak. Fisher knew, with the certainty of an engineer, that the Rice war machine, for all its technical brilliance, was an artisan's workshop. They were facing a conveyor belt that stretched from Pittsburgh to Normandy. He finished his report with a line that was more a confession than a military assessment. The qualitative advantage of our panzers becomes strategically irrelevant in the face of such overwhelming quantitative production. We cannot win a war of material against this system. The contrast in the field, August 1944. The truth of Fisher's report played out not in a briefing room, but in the sun-baked hedgerows of the Bocage country. The setting was a crossroads near the shattered town of St. Lo. Two Tigers of the 101st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion, their iconic long 88mm guns sweeping the narrow lanes, had become immobile monuments. Untersturmführer Hans Richter stood beside C-01, his command tank. The left side final drive had sheared, a catastrophic failure endemic to the overstressed, over-engineered drivetrain. The other Tiger had thrown its track, the complex interleaved wheels jammed with Normandy's glutinous mud. A Burge Panther recovery vehicle was en route, but it was 20 miles away and moving only at night to avoid Jabos, the Allied fighter bombers. Richter heard the distinct, high-revving growl of radial engines before he saw the enemy. Not one, not two, but 4 M4 Shermans, B Company markings on their hulls, emerged from different hedge gaps, their movements coordinated by crisp radio traffic. They were not charging. They were maneuvering. One fired its 75mm gun, the round sparking harmlessly off the Tiger's glacis but forcing Richter and his crew to button up. As the Sherman reversed behind an earthen bank, Richter saw the rear hull of another one, its engine deck smoking lightly. A crewman was already on the back, a replacement track block in his hands, another soldier operating the mounted crane. They were fixing it under observed fire. The engagement was a brutal lesson in differential attrition. The Tiger's guns roared, and one Sherman erupted into a fireball, its ammunition cooking off. But another Sherman, having flanked through an orchard, fired 3 rounds in quick succession into the side of the trackless Tiger. It brewed up. Now it was Richter's immobilized Tiger against 3 mobile, albeit weaker, adversaries. They kept their distance, peppering his tank with shells that couldn't penetrate but kept him pinned, while they called in the real threat, artillery. Within minutes, the sky screamed with incoming 105mm shells from a battalion of priests. The ground around the Tiger churned into a hell's cape of dirt and shrapnel. A direct hit wasn't needed. A near miss could damage optics, shred external equipment, or wound the crew through concussion. Richter, deafened and shaken inside his steel coffin, understood the equation at a visceral level. They had killed perhaps 3, 4 Shermans today, but those losses would be replaced within days, with identical tanks and fresh crews. His Tiger, if they could even recover it, would be shipped back to a repair depot in Germany for months. The Americans weren't fighting his tank. They were fighting Germany's ability to produce and maintain complex machinery. And they were winning. As he ordered his crew to abandon the crippled behemoth, he took one last look at the burning Sherman, and the others still prowling the hedgerows. They were not superior machines. But they were there, and more were coming, always more, the factory and the philosophy of vision from the ruins. The narrative shifts from the field to the source. We see not a battle, but a stark contrast in origins. The Krupp Works, Essen, late 1943, flashback, based on Fisher's intelligence. The image is one of monumental, beleaguered craftsmanship. In a vast, cathedral-like hall, shadowy in the dim light of blackout-restricted windows, a Tiger hull rests on giant jigs. Machinists in grimy overalls hand-fit armor plates with micrometer precision. The air rings with the shriek of custom milling machines carving the complex final drive housing. Each component is a work of art, each bolt hole individually drilled and tapped. The process is slow, methodical, and vulnerable. The camera pans upwards to a gaping hole in the roof, patched with wooden planks, evidence of a recent IAF bombing raid. Production is a relentless struggle against disruption. This is the atelier, building a knight's armor, one painstaking plate at a time. The Detroit Tank Arsenal, Michigan, 1943. Contrasting flashback. The sensory overload is immediate and overwhelming. The roar is constant, not of machines, but of a system. An endless line of Sherman hulls, suspended from an overhead conveyor, glides past stations where workers perform single, repetitive tasks. One man welds a seam with a spray of sparks. The next installs a suspension bogie with an A-powered wrench. The hulls are identical, the parts flowing from bins on the floor in a just-in-time ballet. There are no custom fits, there is enforced standardization. The air smells of ozone, steel, and coffee from a brake cart. At the end of the line, a completed Sherman, its engine already running, drives off under its own power. The camera pulls back to show two parallel lines, then pulls back further through a window to reveal the sprawling, lit complex, operating in 3 shifts around the clock, untouched by war. This is a conveyor belt, producing a soldier's tool by the tens of thousands. Back to France, August 1944, Fischer's epiphany. Klaus Fischer, now analyzing more capture reports and manuals, finally pieces the full picture together. It wasn't just a tank. It was the ecosystem. The Sherman 75mm gun fired the same shell as the M3 anti-tank gun and the cannon on the B-25 Mitchell bomber. Its engines shared parts with aircraft. Its radios, its goggles, its very grease fittings were Army-wide standard issue. This logistical elegance was a weapon more devastating than any 88mm gun. A German panzer division was a unique instrument, requiring a symphony of specialized, fragile support. An American armored division was a modular kit where every broken part had a million identical replacements sailing across the Atlantic. Fischer's realization is complete. The M4 Sherman wasn't a tank design. It was a physical manifestation of American industrial democracy, standardized, replaceable, and utterly inexhaustible. To fight it was to fight physics and economics, not just soldiers. The inheritors and the end of the idea. Spring 1945. The war ground towards its inevitable conclusion, and the proof of Fischer's chilling calculus was written in rusting steel across the German countryside. The setting is the Harz Mountains, April 1945. Oberleutnant Fischer, his uniform now threadbare and stripped of insignia, is part of a ragged column of engineers and technicians being marched into American custody. They trudge past a surreal junkyard that was once the cutting edge of German armor. To one side of the muddy road, in a farmer's field turned Panzer Friedhof, tank cemetery, sit 2 Koenigsdiggers. Their colossal, slab-sided hulls and long 88s are imposing even in defeat. But they are dead. One has a shattered final drive, its track peeled off like a banana skin. The other has been picked clean by souvenir hunters and scroungers. Its intricate Maybach engine is a gutted carcass, picked over for parts that will never come. They are mechanical dinosaurs, too complex to fix in the field, too fuel-hungry to retreat, abandoned when their specialized support system collapsed. And then Fischer sees the other side of the road. Parked in a neat, endless row, as if on a dealer's lot, are M4 Shermans of the U.S. 3rd Armored Division. Dozens of them. Some have scorch marks or patched holes from Panzerfaust hits. But they are operational. Their engines idle with that familiar radial hum. GIs in clean uniforms lounge on the hulls, smoking Lucky Strikes. A recovery vehicle, itself a modified Sherman, is effortlessly towing the damaged one with a sheared track towards a field workshop, a cluster of tents where GIs are already swapping out a bogie assembly from a vast pile of identical spares. The contrast is absolute. The German machines were masterpieces that demanded a perfect world to function. The American machines were tools built for the imperfect, brutal reality of war. A young American sergeant, noticing Fischer's officer's bearing in his fixed stare, walks over. He follows Fischer's gaze from the dead tigers to the living Shermans. Something, ain't it? The sergeant says, not unkindly. He gestures with his chin towards the Koenigsdiggers. Heard those things could knock out one of ours from 2 miles away. Then he nods to the rows of Shermans. But we only had to get lucky once. You had to be lucky every time. Fischer understands imperfectly, not just the words but the philosophy behind them. The American wasn't boasting about a better tank. He was stating a logistical fact. The war had not been lost on the drafting tables of German engineers, whose designs were brilliant. It had been lost in the foundries of Pittsburgh, on the assembly lines of Detroit, and in the holds of Liberty ships. The Sherman was the vector of that defeat. It was a humble, countless vessel that delivered the overwhelming material might of a continent and ocean away. Fisher, the engineer, finally allowed the loss of his professional pride to drain away. He looked at the rows of functional, replaceable Shermans and saw not an inferior vehicle, but a superior system. He saw the future, and Germany had no place in it.